Kathy here from Shaler, North Hills Library, and our ever-present guest, Susie, is here with us as well. And we are getting ready for, Susie, get off the papers. Get off the papers. For week number 9 of Greek Myth Mania with Daedalus and Icarus and Theseus and the Minotaur. One is just kind of a story, Daedalus, a famous story from Greek mythology. The other is one of the great heroes of the myths. So let's not waste any time getting into this adventure. If you have this packet, it gave you the website you can go to if you would like to follow along in the Delaire's book of Greek myths. If you do not want to do that, you are free to just sit back, relax, and listen. The story today begins on page 148 with that kind of a picture and my little post-it note here. And it says Theseus. So let us do some reading. The Muses sang of Heracles and his labors, and they also sang of the island of Crete, ruled by King Minos. And Heracles, by the way, we will get to in one of these upcoming weeks. Ruled by King Minos, the son of Zeus and Europa. His queen, Persephone, a daughter of the sun god Helios, had a golden glimmer in her eyes, like all the descendants of the sun, and was accustomed to great magnificence. King Minos wanted his queen to live in a palace as splendid as her father's, and he ordered Daedalus, an Athenian architect and inventor of marvelous skill, to build the great palace of Knossos. An architect is a person who designs buildings. The palace rose up story upon story over a forest of columns. Winding stairs and intricate passageways connected the many halls and courtyards. Pictures were painted on the walls of the great halls, fountains splashed in the courtyards, and the bathrooms even had running water, like we do today. Bulls' horns of the purest gold crowned the roofs, for the Cretans worshipped the bull, since Zeus, in the shape of a bull, had brought Europa to the island. Here the king and queen and all their court lived in great splendor and happiness, until one day Poseidon sent a snow-white bull from the sea. Since the island of Crete was completely surrounded by his domain, remember he is the god of the sea, he too wanted to be honored, and he ordered King Minos to sacrifice the bull to him. But Queen Pasiphae was so taken by the beauty of the white bull that she persuaded the king to let it live. She admired the bull so much that she ordered Daedalus to construct a hollow wooden cow so she could hide inside it and enjoy the beauty of the bull at close range. And that's what is pictured there. She's sitting in the belly of this fake cow, watching the white bull. Poseidon was very angry, and for punishment, he made the bull go mad. It ravaged the whole island, and though the Cretans were great bull fighters, no one could subdue the beast, until Heracles came to capture it later on with one of his labors, which we'll get to. To punish the king and queen, Poseidon caused Pasiphae to give birth to a monster, the Minotaur. And that is we are going to find today. He was half man, half bull, and ain't nothing but human flesh. So, pretty scary monster. Such a fearful monster. Sorry, I lost my head there. Such a fearful monster could not be allowed to go free. And the clever Daedalus constructed for him a labyrinth under the palace. It was a maze of passageways and little rooms from which nobody could ever hope to find his way out. There the Minotaur was shut in, and as long as he was provided with victims to devour, he kept quiet. When he was hungry, he bellowed so loudly that the whole palace shook. Rawr! King Minos had to wage war with the neighboring islands so he could supply the Minotaur with the prisoners of war for food. When a sign of Minos visited Athens and was accidentally killed, King Minos used this as an excuse to threaten to sack the city unless seven Athenian youths, meaning boys, and 7 Athenian maidens, meaning girls, were sent to Crete to be sacrificed to the Minotaur every 9 years. To save his city, Aegeus, the king of Athens, had to consent, for Minos was much stronger than he was. The people of Athens grumbled. Of course, they'd taken their kids to be killed. For while King Aegeus was childless and had nothing to lose, they had to see their sons and daughters sacrificed to the cruel Minotaur. 2 times 9 years had passed, and the king was growing old. For the 3rd time, a ship with black sails of mourning was due to depart, when word came to the king that a young hero, Theseus from Troezen, was making his way to Athens, destroying all the monsters and highwaymen he met on the road. When King Aegeus heard that, his old heart beat faster. Once in his youth he had visited Troezen and had been secretly married to Princess Aethra. He did not bring Aethra back to Athens with him, but before he left he said to her, "Should you bear me a son, and should he grow up strong enough to lift this boulder under which I hide my sword and golden sandals, send him to me, for then he will be worthy heir to the throne of Athens." King Aegeus in those days was known for his great strength. Theseus, the young hero, arrived in Athens and went straight to the king's palace. Tall and handsome, he stood before Aegeus with the sandals and the sword, and the king was overjoyed. Yay, we're going to be saved. At last he had a son who was a hero as well. The king happily proclaimed Theseus the rightful heir to the throne of Athens, and he became the hero of all Athens when he offered to take the place of one of the victims who were to be sent to Crete. So somebody didn't have to send their son or daughter. He would go instead. So that made him a big friend of the whole city. Old King Aegeus begged his son not to go. He just got reunited and here he is going to his death. But Theseus would not change his mind. "I shall make an end to the Minotaur, and we shall return safely," he said. "We sail with black sails, but we shall return with white sails as a signal of my success." Let's see what happens with that. The ship sailed to Crete, and the 14 young Athenians were locked in a dungeon to await their doom. But King Minos had a lovely daughter, Ariadne, as fair a maiden as eyes could see. She could not bear the thought that handsome Theseus should be sacrificed to the ugly Minotaur. She went to Daedalus, who was the one that designed the labyrinth, remember, and begged for help to save him. He gave Ariadne a magic ball of thread and told her that at midnight, when the Minotaur was fast asleep, she must take Theseus to the labyrinth. The magic ball of thread would roll ahead of him through the maze and lead him to the monster, and then it was up to Theseus to overpower the beast. In the dark of night, Ariadne went to Theseus's prison and whispered that if he would promise to marry her and carry her away with him, she would help him. Gladly Theseus gave his word, and Ariadne led him to the gate of the labyrinth, tied the end of the thread to the gate so he would find his way back, and gave him the ball. As soon as Theseus put the ball of thread on the ground, it rolled ahead of him, through dark corridors, upstairs, downstairs, and around winding passageways. Holding on to the unwinding thread, Theseus followed it wherever it led him, and before long he heard the thunderous snoring of the Minotaur. I don't snore, so I'm not very good at it. And there, surrounded by skulls and bleached bones, lay the monster fast asleep. Where do you think the bones came from? All the people he had eaten, huh? Theseus sprang at the Minotaur. It roared so loudly that the whole palace of Knossos shook. Arr! But the monster was taken by surprise, and so strong was Theseus that with his bare hands he killed the cruel Minotaur, who really had never done anything wrong. That's the way he was made, but that's a viewpoint for another day. And on this picture here we have showing the palace of Knossos, and Theseus down in the basement of it, killing, or sneaking up on, he hasn't killed him yet, the Minotaur. Theseus quickly followed the thread back to Ariadne, who stood watch at the gate. Together they freed the other Athenians and ran to their ship in the harbor. Before they sailed, they bored holes in all of King Minos's ships, so he could not pursue them. Ariadne urged them to hurry, for even she could not save them from Daedalus, the bronze robot who guarded the island. If he should see their ship leaving, he would throw rocks at it and sink it. Should one of them manage to swim ashore, Daedalus would throw himself into a blazing bonfire until he was red hot. Then he would burn the survivor to ashes in a fiery embrace. They could already hear his clanking steps when, just in time, they hoisted their sail and a brisk wind blew them out to sea. In their rush, they forgot to hoist the white sail of victory instead of the black sail of mourning. Theseus's heart was filled with joy. Not only had he saved the Athenians from the Minotaur, he was also bringing a beautiful bride home to Athens. But in the middle of the night, the god Dionysus appeared to him and spoke. "I forbid you to marry Ariadne. I myself have chosen her for my bride. You must set her ashore on the island of Naxos." Theseus could not oppose an Olympian god. When they came to Naxos, he ordered everyone to go ashore and rest. There Ariadne fell into a heavy slumber, and while she slept, Theseus led the others back to the ship, and they sailed off without her. And that is the picture for this double-page spread. There she is sleeping, and there they are sailing away. Poor Ariadne. Poor Ariadne wept bitterly when she awoke and found herself deserted. Little did she suspect that the handsome stranger who came walking toward her was the god Dionysus, and that it was he who had ordered Theseus to abandon her. The god gently dried her tears and gave her a drink from the cup in his hand. And right away the sadness left her. She smiled up at the god. And he put a crown of sparkling jewels on her head and made her his bride. They lived happily together for many years, and their sons became kings of the surrounding islands. Dionysus loved Ariadne greatly, and when she died, he put her jeweled crown into the sky as a constellation, so she would never be forgotten. So that's something else you can look up, the Ariadne constellation, a jeweled crown. So it was kind of sad she was left there, but then she ended up happily married to a god. So Theseus, in his grief at having lost Ariadne, again forgot to hoist the white sail. When King Aegeus saw the black-sailed ship returning from Crete, he threw himself into the sea in despair. He was so upset thinking that his son had been killed. Theseus inherited his father's throne, and he of all of Athens mourned the loss of the old king, and in his honor named the sea in which he had drowned the Aegean Sea. And it is still there till this very day. Over by Greece, you can find it on your map. King Minos was beside himself with fury when he discovered that his daughter had fled with the Athenians. He knew that no one but the brilliant Daedalus could have helped Theseus unravel the mystery of the labyrinth. So Daedalus was kept a prisoner in the palace and treated very harshly. Daedalus could not bear to be locked up and let his talents go to waste. Secretly he made 2 sets of wings, 1 pair for himself and 1 pair for his son Icarus. They were cleverly fashioned of feathers set in beeswax. He showed his son how to use them and warned him not to fly too high, or the heat of the sun would melt the wax. Then he led him up to the highest tower, and flapping their wings, they flew off like 2 birds. Neither King Minos nor Talus the robot could stop their flight. Young and foolish, Icarus could not resist the temptation to rise ever higher into the sky. The whole world seemed at his feet. He flew too close to the sun, and the wax began to melt. The feathers came loose, the wings fell apart, and Icarus plunged into the sea and drowned. Sadly, Daedalus flew on alone and came to the island of Sicily. His fame had flown ahead of him, and the king of Sicily welcomed him warmly, for he too wanted a splendid palace and bathrooms with running water. As soon as King Minos' ships were mended, he set off in pursuit of Daedalus, the cunning craftsman. So even escaping from the island wasn't good enough. He's going to be followed wherever he goes. He sailed east and he sailed west. And when he came to the Sicilian shore and saw the wondrous palace going up, he had no doubts of who was building it. But the king of Sicily hid Daedalus and denied that he had him in his service. Slyly, King Minos sent a conch shell up to the palace with a message that if anyone could pull a thread through the windings of the conch, now that's a big seashell that spirals around, he would give him a sack of gold as a reward. The king of Sicily asked Daedalus to solve the problem. Daedalus thought for a while. Then he tied a silken thread to an ant, put the ant at one end of the conch shell, and a bit of honey at the other end. The ant smelled the honey, wound its way through the shell, and found its way, pulling thread along with it. When King Minos saw this, he demanded the immediate surrender of Daedalus. For now he had proof that the king of Sicily was hiding him. Nobody but Daedalus could have threaded the conch. The king of Sicily had to give in. He invited Minos to a feast, promising to surrender Daedalus. As was his custom, King Minos took a bath before the feast. But when he stepped into the fabulous bath that Daedalus had built, boiling water rushed out of the tap and scalded him to death. And Daedalus remained for the rest of his life at the court of the king of Sicily. And there we have the ant who has pulled the thread through the conch shell. And there we have Daedalus flying in his wings, and Icarus, who had flown even higher, falling, 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 as all the feathers come out of his wings. Kind of a sad story, but at least King Minos gets his comeuppance in the end, huh? He was pretty evil. After the death of King Minos, there was peace between Crete and Athens, and Theseus married Phaedra, Ariadne's younger sister. He became the greatest king Athens ever had, and his fame as a hero spread all over Greece. Another great hero, Theseus, king of the Lapith people in northern Greece, was his inseparable friend. And then it goes on to say a little bit more about those for a while. And I don't know that we're going to read all that, because I don't think we necessarily need to know that about Theseus. Debating if we should read this part or not. I forgot this part was here. And I guess we might as well go all the way through, follow it until the next story. So let's continue. The first time the two heroes met, now this is Pirithous, king of the Lapith people, who was now Theseus's friend. They faced each other in combat, but each was so impressed by the other that instead of fighting, they dropped their weapons and swore eternal friendship. Together they performed many great deeds, and when Pirithous married a Lapith princess, Theseus, of course, was invited to the wedding feast. The centaurs were invited too, for though wild and lawless, they were nonetheless distant relatives. At first they behaved quite mannerly, but as the wine jugs were passed around, they became boisterous and rowdy. Those centaurs are known for being kind of wild. Suddenly a young centaur sprang up, grasped the bride by the hair, and galloped away with her. At that the other centaurs each grasped a screaming girl and took to the hills. Theseus and Pirithous set their men off in swift pursuit and soon caught up with the centaurs. There was a brutal battle, for the wild centaurs tore up big trees and swung them as clubs. But in Theseus and Pirithous they had found their masters. They were chased out of Greece, and the victorious heroes with the bride and the other Lapith girls returned to the feast. And there's some pictures of them fighting the centaurs, dragging the young women away. Pirithous lived happily for a while. Then he became a widower and asked his friend Theseus to help him win a new bride. Theseus vowed to help him, but shuddered when he heard that Pirithous wanted no one less than Persephone, the queen of the dead. She was unhappy with Hades, he said. Since Theseus had promised to help his friend, and a promise could not be broken, he descended to the underworld with Pirithous. They forced their way past Cerberus, the three-headed dog, remember, and entered the gloomy palace. Hades glowered at the two heroes who had dared to enter his realm, but he listened politely while they stated their errand. "Sit down on that bench and we can discuss the matter." They just came and told him they want his wife. What is he going to do? Grim Hades smiled as the two friends sat down, for it was a magic bench from which no one could ever rise. There they were to sit forever, with ghosts and bats flitting about their heads. A long time later, Hercules came to Hades on an errand. Well, again, we're going to hear about him. And pitied the two heroes, trying vainly to get up from the bench. He took hold of Theseus and tore him loose with a mighty tug. But when he tried to free Pirithous, there came a loud earthquake. The gods did not allow Heracles to set him free, for he had shown too great irreverence by daring to want a goddess for his wife. Here he was, a mortal, demanding to have a goddess. Theseus returned to Athens wiser, but thinner, since he was sitting down in the land of the dead for all that time, for a part of him had remained stuck to the bench, ever since the Athenians had had lean thighs. That's what it says. Kind of silly. Okay, so that's it for that book. Let's take a look at our weird but true. And we have Theseus here pictured with the Minotaur, fighting that with the horns. Oh, let's see. Why he's weird. Theseus is said to have started the sport of wrestling by challenging his enemies to a tussle. And let's see what else this page says. Theseus, a popular ancient Greek festival, Thesia, Greek festival, celebrated Theseus with parades and athletic games. Okay. We read about that. And there's their picture of the labyrinth, how it might have looked. Round and complicated. Huh. And there's the spool of thread sailing away in a tragic ending. And there is the king saying no, because he sees a dark black sail. So that is, I think, all that this book says. Some myths say that Theseus may be the son of the sea god Poseidon. This book also mentions. Okay. Icarus is mentioned on page 161 in here. Not all Greek heroes are perfect. Some even make huge mistakes. These are known as tragic heroes, characters with a flaw who are doomed to fail despite their best intentions. One example, Icarus, whose father, the great inventor Daedalus, crafted the wings. Today, his story is still used as a warning about the dangerous effects of being overconfident of your skills. And then lastly, in the treasury of Greek mythology, we have pictured Theseus and the Minotaur. Great thinkers. Theseus, like Hercules, was a famous hero, but a very different type. Brave and strong, he was also a thinker. He solved problems using intellect and compassion. Theseus ruled Athens, which was the birthplace of democracy, and some of the world's greatest thinkers. Socrates is known for his ethics. Plato is known for logic and math. Aeschylus and Sophocles wrote tragic plays. Euripides' plays gave voice to the intelligence of women, slaves, and powerless people, which was never done at that time. Modern thought owes much to ancient Athens, and that's where he was ruler for a while. Okay. Another picture of the labyrinth. All different ways to picture it, and there he is unwinding his spool of thread. And there he is having killed the Minotaur. Theseus beat the Minotaur to death with his bare fist rather than using a rock or a knife. Perhaps the savagery of the monster ignited his own bestial side, meaning fighting without any weapons. Theseus and his cousin Heracles fought the Amazons, killing many, but Theseus married the pretty Amazon princess Antiope and brought her back to Athens, this book says. So sometimes you get different versions of parts of the story, but the overall main story usually remains the same. And that's it for this book from Theseus. I don't remember if Icarus and Daedalus are in this one or not. Let's see. Daedalus is on page 167, so let's try that. Daedalus, I believe, is just mentioned on this page, yes. Yeah, he's just mentioned with the trick of the spool of thread, not about his adventure flying. Okay, so let's look at our packet and see what there was to do this week. If you had a chance to print it out, there is a picture of Icarus and one of the Minotaur that you can color to add to your set of colored pictures of all the Greek gods and goddesses and the hero we have done so far. There's the Minotaur picking up the spool of thread and going, I wonder what this is all about. And then we have, you can go online and read a little bit different version of the myth, but pretty much the same of both of those stories. And then there's videos of Daedalus and Icarus and Theseus and the Minotaur. Both of them are only a couple minutes long, but they're animated, made for kids, so they're safe to watch. And then the craft was recreating the castle of Knossos and the labyrinth underneath. Now I do have to apologize. I only noticed after I had scanned these pages that while the tools are listed, the supplies that you're going to need are not listed. So if you go to the website, you will see everything there though. And all the directions are here, so you can kind of tell by looking at it. You need a shoebox, and you need some green construction paper. And they recommend using foam core, which is this white stuff here. This is my sample palace. Forget the shoebox. This is the palace as it appears. Let's look at that for a minute later. But if you didn't have foam core, you could probably use corrugated cardboard would work. Something that's a little bit thicker would probably work best. Not just like regular thin cardboard, or what else might you use? Like heavy paper or something. That's not going to work so good. And then I basically, to make mine, followed through the directions like they said. I thought it was a little confusing when reading them, but if you just kind of sit down and try it. So first we made the maze, the labyrinth inside. It did not say anything about having a door into it, so I cut a door myself out of the side of the shoebox. And there you can see the spool of thread coming out of there. It talks about, I think I left out one step about making a Minotaur and Theseus to go in it. I didn't want to make one. I just used some pieces I have at home. So this is my Minotaur. Rah! Looks very ferocious, doesn't he? Well, I figured he's red, like blood red. That would be pretty scary. And the horns. I knew the Minotaur had horns. And then this is my Theseus. Ready for action. So not exactly who you would have as your Theseus and Minotaur, perhaps, if you made your own. But they can still go at it, and one can down the other, and then this one, after the one is down, can follow his way. Let me show you the thing. Can follow his way around the labyrinth and get his way back out. So, that is what you have in the basement. Then you can fold up the door there, and you have the palace on top. So they told you to trace some green construction paper. And then cut out whatever shape you wanted your palace to be on the base. Cut out a second floor to go above it, and put pinpricks in, and use some little wooden dowels that you can buy. Like, they can be like shish kebab skewers or something thin that can break off. Now I will say I had a hard time getting them all the right height, And if you look closely, you can see some of them aren't the right height because they're not even touching. And if one is a little bit taller, then it makes the whole floor not really sit too even. But as long as a number of them are touching, it still works. And I used Elmer's glue for almost everything, but I did need to use hot glue for the tops of the columns when I was attaching the foam cord to them, because the Elmer's would just take too long to dry. I needed something that was going to dry right away and be a little more solid instead of trying to hold all these columns in place. So that is my Palasinosos. You can look it up online and see pictures of how it exists today in ruins and how they think it might have existed back then. It did talk about painting the columns red. I didn't want to do that. If you want to paint them red or any other color you want, or using a marker on them, however you want to do it, I always tell you it's up to you. You can change things and do them a little bit different. I just wanted to leave mine the plain color, and that was fine with me. So that is what I did. But that was a little more involved craft than we usually do. But I thought it was kind of a cool one, and you can make a big project out of it, or you can scale it back a little bit as you see fit. Maybe you only make the labyrinth part underneath, and you don't make the whole castle. And as she points out in her directions, they made their castle go up 3 floors. Maybe you only want yours to go 2, like I did. Maybe you want it to go 4 or 5. It depends how much effort you want to put into it. So that was the craft. And then we had a word search about myths and legends, and we have Daedalus and Icarus's name mentioned there, and the labyrinth, King Minos, the Minotaur. Theseus was not in this one, but that's okay. Can't be everything. And then we had about a crossword puzzle about Icarus flying away. And I gave you the answers to that, so don't look at the answer sheet if you don't want to know what the answers are. And lastly, we had some mazes, and there are some mazes you can do online at a site, or ones that you can go to and print out. I just gave you a couple samples here in my packet. The Minotaurs Maze, there's another maze with an X of where to start and get out. And this was, can you get through the tricky labyrinth? See if you can get all the way through without getting lost, the ancient Greek says. So, just a couple mazes if you like to do mazes and work yourself out of the labyrinth. So that is it for my packet. Hopefully you have fun with some puzzles and some crafts and reading about these myths. Remember, you can always come into the library and get a ton more Greek myth books. We have whole shelves on them. And we are open 6 days a week. Yes, 6 days. The only day we're closed is Sunday, but the hours vary from day to day, so check out our website. If you've missed any of the earlier Greek weeks, you can catch everything on our children's page. And stay tuned for more adventures of Greek mythology coming up in future weeks. So this has been Miss Kathy from Shaler North Hills Library, and Seuss, who is now sleeping off screen, coming at you. Thanks for watching. Have fun. Bye.